Communication often breaks down. We can easily hear something the wrong way or take a phrase like carve the turkey the wrong way. Understanding can break down when we read the Bible too. Particularly since we who read it are in a different era, a different culture than those who wrote it. We have different customs, we have different lifestyles. And if we aren't aware of those differences, then we can take what was written the wrong way. One of the verses in Deuteronomy chapter 22 that Sam read for us was verse 8. When you build a new house, make a parapet around your roof. A parapet is a low wall around the edge of a roof. Now, are you understanding or are you misunderstanding what God has in mind here as he says this? Well, let's see. If you are picturing a roof like the houses around here, which usually have a sloped roof, right? If you're picturing that kind of roof with a railing around it, you are misunderstanding it. You are taking this command the wrong way. The people that Moses was speaking to had houses radically different than ours. In those days, in that part of the world, the roof was flat. And they basically used it like we would use a patio or a deck. There was no air conditioning, of course, back in biblical days. So after the sun went down, you wanted to be where you could catch any little breeze that was going on. So people ate and slept on their roof. Because they did those things on their flat house roofs, God told them to put parapets on them, so that if little Abe is hyperactive, he doesn't go hurtling off the roof. So a restless sleeper doesn't tumble off in the middle of the night. Without knowing what life was like in biblical times, we misunderstand that text. So this brings up the third discipline necessary as we read the Bible. Discipline number 3, consider the original situation. The more that we know about the situation when a text was written, their customs, their practices, the events going on, the people that are being named, the places that are being named, the easier it is, obviously, for us to figure out the meaning. Historical and cultural facts can help explain the text. Let's look at another passage showing this. This is in Mark chapter 7, verses 1 to 5. The Pharisees and some of the teachers of the law who came from Jerusalem gathered around Jesus, and it says they saw some of his disciples eating food with hands that were defiled, that is, unwashed. And verse 5, the Pharisees and the teachers of the law were concerned about this. And we understand, don't we, why the Pharisees were concerned. I mean, of course, you're supposed to wash your hands before you eat. Didn't our mothers tell us this countless times? That's what we today would think about as we read this text. But that would be us misunderstanding it. That would be us totally missing the dynamics that were going on in that day. So Mark adds an explanation for us. This is verses 3 and 4. The Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they give their hands a ceremonial washing, holding to the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. Goes on saying some of the things they wash. So the Pharisees were not appalled that Jesus was letting his disciples eat with germy hands, but with hands that were ritually unclean. Now, why didn't the biblical authors always put in an explanatory note like that? Mark was very nice and put that little parentheses in for us. Why don't all the authors spell out the things that we need to know in order to understand their writing? And the answer is, the audience that they were writing to, the people that they were thinking about as they wrote, usually already knew those cultural dynamics. That was shared knowledge. So, you don't need to state it. And the fact that Mark did put in this little parenthesis, this little explanation, is an indication that he was writing to non-Jewish readers. Those verses, that parenthesis, is one of the clues that Mark was writing to Gentiles rather than to the Jews. Now I want us to zero in on a time when being aware of cultural and historical information is extremely important. When the text is a command. That command might not apply to us if it is written for a situation that is different than our situation. That's what's happening in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 8, that Sam read. Moses told people in that situation with flat roofs where they spent lots of time on them to build parapets around their house roof. But we don't spend lots of time on our roofs. So it doesn't apply to us. That command doesn't apply to us because our situation is different. Now we're sort of used to, there's a lot of things in Leviticus and Deuteronomy that, we don't do. Even a command in the New Testament given to the church multiple times might not apply to us if our situation is different than the situation that the command was given to. Here's an example. 5 times the church is told, greet one another with a holy kiss. Romans chapter 16, 1 Corinthians 16, 2 Corinthians 13, 1 Thessalonians 5, 1 Peter 5. The fact that it was said so often, it's clear that God wants the church, when we gather, to greet one another with warm affection. And in Bible days, how did you show warm affection? In Bible days, you greeted family, you greeted close friends with a kiss. So God wanted you to do that in church too, because these are your brothers and sisters. This is a new family. the family of God. However, do we do that? It's different in our culture. The kiss has a radically different function in our culture. If we would greet people with a kiss here in church, we would likely offend most of them. I guess, yeah, all of them. Yeah, because you wouldn't greet your wife or your husband because hopefully you had already seen them during the day. So when the text is a command, it's important that we note the situation for which it was intended, and then we ask, did the author have people in our situation in mind? Now, what do we do with commands that were addressed to life situations different than ours, like the holy kiss? Are we to ignore them? Are we to say, well, that teaching refers to another culture, so those instructions have nothing to do with us? It's one option. Another one is, are we to start them up again? Say, if the Bible commands it, if the practice is taught in the Bible, well then, if we're not doing it now, we had better start doing it. And some of us grew up in communities that did that with the holy kiss. It's not like our culture did that when you were greeting someone who you were very close to on the street. You would kiss them. No, but the Bible said it, so I grew up seeing my father do this as he greeted other ordained men. I would say there's a third, better, much better way, and that is discern the timeless principle behind the specific time-bound instruction, and then discern how to best express that principle in our culture. Like with the holy kiss, as we sort of translate the holy kiss, we asked, what meaning did that have in the New Testament age? What was the spirit behind this instruction? And it's clear, as I already said, God's deep concern was that when we come to church, we express that we are brothers and sisters by this act of warm affection. And then we asked, how can we best show that warm affection in our situation today? And in our culture, we've decided it's the holy sidearm hug. I greeted Dave that way today in the hall. Or maybe the firm handshake. Or maybe it's just you see someone, particularly in this pandemic age of distance, you just see them and you catch them in the eye and you communicate with your eyes that you are glad to see them. You notice them. You really see them. It's not just sort of a passing glance. So the principle is what is binding, not the culture-bound act. The kiss is not binding on us, but that deep principle of show warm affection, that is binding on us. We need to make sure that we do that. Let's go through this, the third way, discern the timeless principle, with Deuteronomy 22, verse 8 again. So we don't need a parapet on our roof because we don't do what they did on their roof. But what is the transcultural principle here? God told them to put parapets on their flat house roofs because of little hyperactive Abe and some of the others who might tumble off. The end of verse 8 says you should do this so that you may not bring the guilt of bloodshed on your house if someone falls from the roof. So one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not kill. Moses here is saying we're not only to refrain from actively killing someone, but we're also to take positive steps to keep others from killing themselves on our property if they should happen to fall from our roof. This verse is the mother of all safety regulations. This should be OSHA's text. I don't know if you like OSHA or not, but anyway. This is why we install railings on our stairs. We are to see the person who comes to our house as somehow our responsibility. This is an anti-Cain moment. Cain said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" This is God saying, "You are your brother's keeper." This command is teaching us concern for our neighbor's safety. We must protect reckless, careless, self-damaging people, because our God is a kind of God who cares for such people. I want to shift gears a little bit here and give some bits of pastoral counsel. I said that historical, cultural information can help explain the text, but that this information is generally left unspoken in the text because both the author and the original audience already knew it. So how do we learn it? Well, people who have studied the Bible and studied the lands and the culture and the customs of the Bible tend to write books. So you have Bible dictionaries, you have commentaries, and thankfully in our day and age a lot of that is online. You can go to sites like BibleGateway.com. It's amazing what all resources they have for us. But here is what I would say is a very convenient, good source for that. And that's the NIV Study Bible. Here's my older edition of it. But a study Bible has the text up here in the first part, and then down below are notes. And there's some places where there will be, trying to find, some places, there's a whole lot more notes than what there is of the text. And if there is some cultural background that is important to know, they will have a note explaining it for you. Now, I said the NIV Study Bible. There are other good study Bibles as well, but I'm partial to this one. The NIV Study Bible's notes come from a wide spectrum of Bible-believing scholars. All the other study Bibles are either like one well-known church leader, the John MacArthur Study Bible, whatever, or they come from just one part of the spectrum of the church. The ESV Bible, Study Bible, is very, very good quality, but it's written from the Reformed theological perspective. So, it's not the whole spectrum, but just one part of it. I went to seminary, a Reformed seminary, so they're good. You can learn a lot from them, but you'll also hear some things that, well, anyway, don't need to go there. But if you don't have one of these, don't say, well, maybe I might as well skip reading the Bible because I don't have one of these fancy study Bibles, or don't own some commentaries that'll help me make sure that I got this background information. No, there is still much that you can receive from the Bible, even if you just have the straight text. Yes, you might miss some things, but there are many good things that you will get just by using the knowledge you do have and your common sense as you read. For instance, those first verses that Sam read for us, verses 6 and 7 in Deuteronomy chapter 22. If you come across a bird's nest and the mother is sitting on the nest, you may take the eggs or the young, but be sure to let the mother go so that it may be well with you and you may have a long life. That is a beautiful little instruction there, a wise, compassionate word. It acknowledges our need for food. It is okay to take the eggs, okay to take the young, but yet is careful that there will still be plenty of that kind of food around in the next weeks and months and years as well. Letting the mother bird go means that there will be a new nest soon. You haven't destroyed the source of the food, so that it may go well with you, Moses says. In other words, you're living in a land in a way that is sustainable, that can be sustained for centuries. What about those other verses? It seemed to me that when Sam finished reading them, he thought, okay, was that really what I was supposed to read? But don't know. He's shaking his head, yeah, kind of yes. Verse 9, do not plant two kinds of seed in your vineyard. And it's probably meaning between the rows of the grapes. Do not plow with an ox and a donkey yoked together. And verse 11, do not wear clothes of wool and linen woven together. That picture is from the internet. It's supposedly that's a dress of linen and wool. I had Sam read those verses just so I could tell you this. Just as there are places in the Bible where you receive many good things as you read them, so there are also places that stump us. Places that even when you spend like several hours reading the books that give you, the cultural and historical background, you're still somewhat mystified as to what Moses had in mind with that. So what do we do when that happens? First, be reassured. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with you or something wrong with the Bible. These three stumped me. After hours, I think I have a probable understanding. And I say these three. I think they are a set. The three of them also appear together in Leviticus as well. I think I see why a compassionate, wise God would command them. Basically, there's mild value in doing each of them, but it doesn't seem like enough that they would make a law about it, unless God is doing something, unless like God is seeing some value in getting his people to err on the side of not mixing things, but keeping things pure and distinct. Because the main problem that his people have is the difficulty in remaining separate from the idolatrous customs of the neighbors around them. So it's like he's trying to get them into the groove of not mixing things, but keeping things pure and distinct. But that was me after several hours. God doesn't expect you to spend hours researching, a couple of verses. When you're reading the Bible and a couple of verses stump you, feel okay about letting them sit there and going on. Go on to what's next in the text. Go on until you find yourself feeding on something that is nourishing you, feeding on the good stuff. Don't fixate on verses that you don't understand. Focus on what you do understand. Mark Twain, people are trying to figure out whether he was a believer or not. He would say stuff on both sides. But I loved his comment about passages like this. He said, it's not the passages in the Bible I don't understand that bother me. It's the passages I do understand. There's plenty that you can read that will feed you, that will nourish you, and you can enjoy God's word at work in your life.